Every half an hour in the UK, someone risks their life on the railway. 25,000 volts of electricity from overhead wires. That's 100 times stronger than the electricity in your house. Up to 400 tons of train coming down the track at speeds of up to 125 miles per hour. A person doesn't stand much chance against those numbers. So why do more than 19,000 of us try and take the railway on every year? There are lots of reasons people end up on railway tracks. Trying to retrieve a dropped phone or bag, taking a shortcut rather than walking the long way round. Sometimes it's sadly because someone wants to get hurt. And sometimes it's because people think they're invincible and a little bit of danger is part of the fun. For some reason, we perceive trains as being less dangerous than cars on the road, or at least no more dangerous. But there's a reason that the railway is protected by fences and the road isn't. Why it's against the law to step onto the railway and not the road. Because the consequences are in a whole different league. And those consequences extend to more than just the lives of the trespassers and their families if something goes wrong. It costs taxpayers many millions of pounds in delays to trains, for one thing. We headed up north to Leeds to meet Olga Baranikova and her colleagues to find out what Network Rail is doing to tackle this perennial problem. Olga is a route crime lead for Network Rail, looking after the north and east of England.
Any unauthorised entry onto the railway premises, railway jurisdiction beyond the boundary fence would be classed as a trespass. And any incidents that we potentially thought may lead to trespass also will be classed as a trespass.
So what are the different types of trespass? Because they're not all the same and they're not all treated the same, are they?
When we look at the trespass, we always try to identify the root cause, why people go there, and it would help to really look at different demographics, different reasons why people there, and different, like you say, types. So it could be adult or kids accessing the railway for the shortcut because it's easier to use the rail tracks just to go somewhere in a local park or where they usually hang out, or simply just where people do hang out and it's very close to the boundary fence. It could be a park nearby where kids playing football, and then the ball goes over the fence, and what do? They climb over to retrieve it. That is a trespass. And we do see, depending on the year, depending on the time of the year, we do see that different change. So closer to the warmer weather, lighter evenings, we see kids coming out more, spending more time outside, and that's where we see most of the youth trespass occurs, so somewhere starting from April time.
Has trespass always been a problem on the railway, or is it something that has come about more recently? Because we never used to have gates and fences all along the railway, but now we're putting them in every place that we can to prevent trespass. So is it just that we report more now, or is it that it's actually on the increase compared with what it was in the past?
So I think the problem always been there. People used to trespass, and we have put a lot of fences where we have seen the spike. We have historic information on trespass, and it could push the problem away.
Network Rail and the British Transport Police are having some success with preventing trespass though, and the team on the north and east route suggested we head to a site just outside Leeds to find out what they've been up to. This is Dale Kelly, a mobile operations manager for Network Rail.
So why have you brought us to Wyke? What's been happening here?
Well, here at Wyke, where we are now, last summer, throughout the summer months, We had about 7 or 8 trespassers involving children, where they've been reported seen messing around on the train tracks, and we've got trains coming past here at 80 mile an hour. Trains at 80 mile an hour and pedestrians or people that shouldn't be there. Obviously, it's not a good mix. You know, we don't want people anywhere near the railway for the dangers that they cause to themselves and others. So what we've done, because we've highlighted a problem here and we've had trespass, we've got fences everywhere, but not everywhere has got amazing fences like that. You've got to understand we can't put fence on top of bridges like that. So what we've done, we've highlighted where the children or the trespassers were getting on, which is just about 50 yards up the track, and we've put stuff like anti-vandal paint down. We've put signs up and also gone to the local schools. We've identified children and gone to the local schools. So my official title is Mobile Operations Manager. So I get a call off our control centre, which is based in York, and they'll tell me what's been reported. There's an issue, there's children trespassing, they've seen something, and I'll basically respond. So I always say it's a bit like whether it be a fire service would respond to a fire, or a lifeboat would respond to someone needing rescue. We respond to any incident that's on the railway where there's potential threat to life. We need to get here as quick as possible, and along with the police.
This is Chris Smith, a police constable in the disruption tasking team at the British Transport Police.
Yeah, so a call will come through initially from Network Rail. If it's been 9 times out of 10, it's a driver that'll seen the trespass on the tracks, so they'll ring through to Network Rail control. Their control will ring our control, and officers will be dispatched to that particular location. Once a call comes through on our radios, we'll be travelling on blue lights, so obviously it's classed as an emergency with someone been on the tracks. When we get to the location, we'll link in with the Network Rail Mobile Operations Manager that will have been dispatched from Network Rail, but we can't access the tracks until we've linked in with the MOM, is what we call them, because they get the blocks and stops on the line, and then we can access the line safely and go. We attend basically the last known location of where that trespasser was seen. We can utilise, for example, in this location here we've got bridges, so we can utilise that looking down the tracks at first. But if we're in a different location where we can't utilise bridges, we will do what we call a track walk in with the MOMs. Our team do actually have drones now. We've had them for about 2 years. So if it's quite a rural and long location, we can get our drone up in the air. So that saves quite a lot of time, because obviously the drone can move quicker than any person can. So that's a real useful bit of kit that we've got, like I say, in the last couple of years. And that can do an awful lot of cover of the tracks. And also with the heat-seeking infrared we've got on those drones, we can check the sidings, the shrubbery, the overgrowth parts of the railway as well.
And so what do you do when you find trespassers on the tracks then?
It's getting that person off the railway to a place of safety. And then 9 times out of 10 they'll be put in our police car and then taken back. If it's a youth, they'll be taken back home initially. And if the time's right, we'll interview and report that person in front of the parents. And then a decision will be made as to what happens to that individual. If the person is intoxicated, that can be a little bit different, because there's potential that they could come back to the tracks. So especially if it's an adult and they're intoxicated, they would predominantly probably be arrested and taken to a custody suite, which is more a place of safety. And when they've sobered up, they'd be processed and dealt with the following morning. With younger people in particular, they don't realise the dangers of the railway, of how fast the trains move, the weight and size of them, that they can't just stop like a car going at lower speed can more or less come to a stop. Trains can't just do that, so the ultimate severity of it is they'll lose their lives, getting struck by a train, and young people don't realise that. So a lot of it with the youth element of it is the educational side of it. So it's educating and getting the message across and explaining the dangers of the railway.
As well as the many successful national campaigns that Network Rail has done, much of the education when it comes to youth trespass is done in schools by people like Chloe Creffield, the Community Safety Manager for the North and East route. It's her role to raise awareness of the dangers of the railway in her area.
How do you convince children, particularly teenagers, that the railway is dangerous? Because they all think they're invincible, don't they?
The presentations I do, we tend to include a lot of real life stories. There's my own because that we were actually personally affected by somebody that we knew who got killed going on the railway tracks. And so I explained that that is why I'm there. These things do happen. We also try and do interactive things. So we've got Leeds Station Safety Week coming up in May, where students from 20 schools will go round the station. They'll have a time in a driver simulator, so they'll see how long it takes for a train to actually come to a stop. They'll be going in the train cab of and actually seeing where the driver sits and what they get to do, and they'll get to see what it's like to be locked up in a British Transport police van and meet the police dog. So the more opportunities we can do things like that, we always try and encourage, just to actually make sure the message that we're getting across is, actually gets embedded with them.
So why do you think that young people trespass on the railway? Because obviously it is a big part of the trespass incidents.
Kids like to experiment. They like to dare each other, and they hear something about the railway. There was a belief that putting a 2p on a track would derail a train. So is that true? So they'll go on the tracks to actually do these things, not realising that just those ballast stones around the track get really slippy and they could fall and hit their heads. The fact that what they're putting on the railhead, when a train actually hits it at speed, it sends it flying out really fast, so it can be like shrapnel from a bomb. And we've had people being blinded from 2p coins. But there's also a train going at speed will have a wind turbulence around it that can actually suck somebody into the train. And you just spend time on the railway talking to people about what they've experienced, what they've seen, how they've had somebody laying on the train track because they saw it on Mission Impossible or James Bond. They don't realise it's not possible in this country because the train operators put everything underneath a train. They don't know the actual dangers that they're risking when they go on. They just want to experiment, and that's the whole attraction. Anybody in the railway who knows what the dangers are, it's the last place we want to be is on that track. And a lot of us just don't understand why so many people go towards it. And for me, it is down to them just not being aware. And my job is just explaining what those choices can result in and making them understand that 9 times out of 10 it might not happen to somebody, but you could be that 10th person where the outcome could be very different.
But it's not just about the human consequences. There's also the very real impact on the railway. Last year, Trespass caused 1.5 million minutes of delays and cost more than £70 million in compensation and internal charges.
Even just trespassing here at Wyke, where we are, you're impacting trains in Leeds train station, because you're having to delay trains. That train has then got to go to Leeds. It's missed its slot to get in, so it might be sat outside Leeds 10 minutes waiting to get a platform. Before you know it, a little trespass here has racked up maybe, £2,000 in delays.
And so how do you balance that then? How do you decide when you need to stop the trains and when you might need to just run them under caution, slower, for example?
You've got a vast railway and you've got many trespassers out there, and some have different motives. You could have children who are messing around or physically on the tracks, messing and not knowing any dangers that's happening. And then you could have potentially a dog walker picking blackberries right on the edge of the railway, which you wouldn't perceive he was a danger to himself. So there's various different factors that come in. If fundamentally we don't know if they're a risk to themselves, then we just stop trains. We always have safety at the paramount at the top.
Because a trend was starting to develop of repeated trespass from children at Wyke, it was an accident waiting to happen. Time to intervene. This next stage is a bit like detective work, investigating where trespassers are gaining access to the railway, who they are, and how best to stop them. This is Ed Atkinson, a technical deployment officer and one of the people that gets called out to help in that investigation.
I'll then go to site, I'll use what 3 words, ELR and mileages, bridge locations, anything that will help me assess the situation. I go around checking all different access points, checking what they might have been doing when they were down on track, and I'll try and install a hidden camera where I think's best to basically catch them. And my goal when it comes to trespass is to catch them as soon as they've entered the boundary fence, because if we can catch them sooner rather than later, then we can respond to that event, get the BTP out, get the moms out, and it means that we either catch people on site as before they're able to do any kind of vandalism, or we're able to get down and get them off the track before one of them gets struck by a train, basically.
So what are we looking at behind us here? What is, because there's something special about this fence, isn't there?
So yeah, with this fence, for this particular trespass incident, we found out that we're getting on in a couple of locations, and this is one of the locations we're getting on. So we've installed some signs to remind people of, well, what happens if you trespass on the railway. It's dangerous and you can be fined. We've also installed some anti-vandal paint and anti-climb paint here, which is essentially just paint that stays wet and it will just stick to you and get everywhere. If it gets on your clothes are ruined. If it gets on your fingers, it won't wash up for a good week or so.
Oh really? So if you touch that black paint, it literally wouldn't come off for ages?
It will just stick to you, yeah. And essentially, if you've been on here and BTP do come out and you've got off railway before they've seen you, they'll still know you've been on.
Because you're covered
you'll
in
be
the paint.
covered in black paint, yeah.
Ed works in Paula Cunningham's team, who coordinates the covert operations.
I have a team of staff who primarily their job is to install hidden cameras around the railway. So we identify hotspot sites, sites where we know there's youth trespass. It could be on a bridge, it could be line side, fencing damaged, any of that. And then we go and hide tiny little cameras to identify how much of an issue it is, how much it's affecting the trains and obviously ultimately the passengers. And then when the camera is installed, and then if anybody comes along and it activates, the images are sent to our control centre, and they can instantly get staff to site. And there's sometimes catch people who are there.
So how many cameras have you got out at any one time then?
We have approximately 180 cameras out on the full north and east and east coast area at the moment. Not just for trespass, it's for cable theft, vandalism, theft in general, crime incidents, but a lot of it is for trespass, especially child trespass. We install maybe 15 to 20 a week.
For the teams working to prevent trespass on the railway, many of them do it because they have been personally affected by trespass, or understand the mindset of those that do it. Chloe tells her story in schools. Dale's story is a surprising one.
Yeah, so I'm doing this job now, ironically, maybe looking out for trespassers and catching trespassers and keeping the railway safe. But when I was 14, so many years ago, I think over 20 years ago, I was actually caught trespassing on the railway by a Network Rail mom. I don't think it was called a mom at the time, operations manager, but the equivalent caught me and my friends. We were trespassing and I'll hold my hands up. You know, we knew we shouldn't be doing it, but there was no education there of how fast the trains were, how much dangers were involved. And as a result, we were caught, spoken to by Network Rail and the police. And strangely enough, I actually work with that person now, still at Network Rail. So, you know, it's quite a good, ironic story that is good to tell.
The cost to so many lives, whether it's those directly affected by trespass or those delayed or inconvenienced because of it, makes it worth doing everything we can to reduce the number of incidents.
I do believe people trespassing know they shouldn't be there. I've got no, you know, I'm under no illusion that they don't know that. But it's just a case of, do they know the dangers? Do they know what could happen? You know, do they know what financial implication that they're causing.
Ultimately, the worst case scenario is that you will lose your life if you get hit by a train.
It is still a challenge, and I think it is remain a challenge because it's difficult to predict what people will do. Although it is not decreasing as we would like to see, it is still a positive that we engage with so many people and collaborate with, like I said, with internally with all our teams, as well as British Transport Police, to ensure that we visit all those areas that has been highlighted as a hotspot. And like Wyke is a great example where incidents have reduced and we were able to engage with the school. We were able to identify those individuals who were involved. And it has been quiet, touch wood.
Trespass will probably never completely disappear, but the interventions by Network Rail, the British Transport Police and train operators are certainly showing local improvements. Ultimately, what's needed is for more people to really understand the dangers they face when they step on the track. Because as Chloe said, 9 times out of 10, you might make it, but you could be number 10.
For everyone's safety, please do not cross the tracks. Images are recorded and passed to the British Transport Police.